What are your favourite and least favourite escalations? Why is that the case? Okay, so first up, Radiant. I do quite like the theme of Radiant escalations. I like the moonlit sky, I like the time warping temples, I like the optional dungeon like puzzles you can solve which give you a further boost before fighting the Chronovore. I also happen to really like the Chronovore itself. It can be quite a complicated behemoth to take down, but I think it's very unique and otherworldly. And then you have the legendary weapon which can be obtained from the Chronovore, where you draw temporal power of Radiant Ether to return to wherever you were 3 seconds before. Not the best ability out there, but not the worst. However, I do find the art styles of some of the Radiant landscapes a little bit dull, and I really don't enjoy fighting a lot of Radiant behemoths. In my opinion, and don't shoot me down, that Radiant behemoths are some of the least satisfying to take on. And don't get me started on the Alera, the newest behemoth added to Dauntless. I find it a bit of a mess, lots of different parts just randomly put together, and it can be extremely frustrating to fight against. I'm also not too keen that it took over the summoning stone at the Paradox Breaks from the Chronovore. The Chronovore was just so much better suited there, I feel. But overall, certainly not the worst escalation, but definitely not my favourite. And then moving on, we have the Blaze escalation. I very much enjoyed my time playing that one. I think the theme and the art style are brilliant and treacherous. I love the densely packed jungle which surrounds the volcanic landscape. Blaze behemoths can present a really deadly challenge. I've always personally found the Hellion to be underrated in terms of how difficult it is to fight. And then you have the Torgadoro, an ape built from molten lava, absolute badass in my opinion. His unique animations alone are some of the best in the entire game. The legendary weapons you can craft from the Torgadoro look wonderful, and their unique legendary abilities aren't too bad either. When activated, they allow you to enter a rage state, gaining new attacks for 15 seconds dealing plus 25% damage when the target is below 50% health, and it resets on a behemoth kill or after 90 seconds. Next up we have the Umbrell escalation, which is very dark, very unique. It provides a very spooky and claustrophobic atmosphere. Umbrell, like Radiant behemoths, can be quite difficult and at times frustrating to take down, but I find them far less frustrating than Radiant behemoths. They're also much better and much more cool to look at, as is the art style of the landscapes. The legendary behemoth, the Thrax, is quite creepy, quite unique, but a little bit underwhelming in my opinion, especially when you've got behemoths like the Shroud to contend with. The legendary weapons are also just a little bit underwhelming in my opinion. When activated, they allow you to deal Umbrell damage to nearby enemies and teleport high into the sky, then choose a spot to slam down on, dealing additional Umbrell damage. Next up, we have another beautiful escalation, the Terra escalation, which is set in Arborhome, the original home to the Farslayers. This escalation has a wonderful environment. It's like being teleported to a high fantasy elven kingdom from the Lord of the Rings or something like that. The Farslayers, just like the Frost Wardens, are some of my favourite factions in Dauntless, along with their rich stories and lore. Terra behemoths can present a fairly good challenge, and they're not too frustrating to go up against as well. And then you have the legendary behemoth, the Agaris, which is an absolutely brilliantly designed behemoth in my opinion. It's an overgrown mass of fungi and roots, and although it's mostly static, it presents a really fun challenge. The legendary weapon is brilliant, especially if you're newer to the game, and it was the first legendary weapon that I unlocked. It allows you to completely revive all your teammates and yourself with the hit of a button. Then we have the Frost escalation, which I would put up there with the Terra escalation, an absolutely brilliant one in my opinion. Unlike other escalations, you face a further challenge in that you can be consumed by the frost. This can be difficult to face, along with having to slay the behemoths as well in your first few playthroughs, and it's also a little bit frustrating until you get the hang of it. You can choose from 4 selected boons at the beginning of the hunt, which aids you along your way. I think being in the snowy treacherous mountains and finally being able to see the kingdom of Skaldiscar is probably my favourite amongst all the escalations in terms of art style. And then you have the legendary behemoth, the Urska, which is wonderfully designed as a saber-toothed tiger of sorts. The only letdown of this escalation, I feel, is the legendary ability you get from the weapons crafted from the Urska. The Frost Shield just really doesn't cut it for me. It's not very impressive and it doesn't do enough to grant it status as a legendary ability. So finally we have the Shock escalation, and I couldn't actually find a trailer for the Shock escalation, perhaps because it was the first escalation I think. So here's the Savite reveal trailer, because his fight is the best shock behemoth by far, no contest. So the shock escalation, in my opinion, is probably one of the weakest. And it's difficult to say that because I feel like the Malcarion is one of the best legendary behemoths out there. However, I just find the whole art style, the terrain for the escalation just to be a little bit bland. There's nothing really unique about this escalation. As I said though, the Malcarion is a very good legendary behemoth. I like the animations for it, I like the design, I think it works very, very well. It's just a shame about the rest of the escalation. Okay, so now we're going to rank all of the escalations based on my opinions. And remember, this is subjective, these are just my opinions, and feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong. We all have different opinions and different preferences. I'd love to know what yours are in the comment section below. So first up we have the Radiant Escalation. I enjoy the theme, I enjoy some of the puzzle solving, I like the Chronovore, and I feel like the legendary weapon is acceptable. However, Radiant behemoths frustrate me, especially the Elira. I'm not a big fan of that behemoth. And I'm not too keen for the art style of these behemoths, and that goes for the Radiant landscapes as well. For example, the Paradox Breaks just doesn't do it for me. So that is another negative thing. So taking into account the competition of other escalations, I would place Radiant Escalations in the C category. Next up we have the Blaze Escalation. I very much like the Torgadoro, the legendary behemoth. I think he's very intimidating, very threatening. The legendary weapon, again, is acceptable, but could be better. I very much like the volcanic jungle environment. I wish that was utilised in Dauntless much more. So where to put the Blaze Escalation on this chart? I would say it would be in the A category. Then we have the Umbrell Escalation. I very much enjoy the claustrophobic Umbrell atmosphere that's created by this escalation. I think Thrax is a pretty cool legendary behemoth, but when you have something as nightmarish as the Shroud, it's very hard to compete with, so it could have been a little bit better. The legendary ability is pretty cool, quite unique, but not always the most useful amongst all the other legendary abilities that there are to choose from. With that taken into account, I would place the Umbrell Escalation in the B category. Following this, we have the Terra Escalation, which I stated was one of my favourites. I feel like developers did a very good job of depicting the Arbor home to the Farslayers, and it's an environment that I just kinda want to stay in. It's a shame you have to rush through escalations. The Agaris is legendary indeed, enormous and grotesque, and the legendary ability is amongst the best, especially for newer players. I think you can already predict where I'm going to be putting this one, S category. Next up, we have the Frost Escalation. Another one of my favourite escalations for so many reasons. The threat of being frozen by your environment was very frustrating to begin with, but once I got the hang of it, I found it very rewarding. I like Frost Behemoths, I like the environment, I love being able to see Skaldiscar in all its glory. I think the Urska is a very well crafted behemoth, it looks fantastic. However, the legendary weapon leaves a lot to be desired. The ability is underwhelming and underpowered, and that's the only drawback I have of the Frost Escalation. But there's so much to enjoy here, and due to all that, I'm going to place this again as an S category escalation. Finally, we have the Shock Escalation, which I stated was one of my least favourites for a few reasons. The landscape and the art style is pretty bland, there's nothing really unique about it. I understand that it was the earliest escalation and that's probably why, but these have to go against it. In fact, the only redeeming quality of this escalation is the legendary behemoth, the Malcarion, which I find is very well crafted and has a very good animation style. We need more dragons in Dauntless is what I'm trying to say. So where to rank this? It's probably a little bit harsh putting it as a D, but someone's got to go at the bottom of the pile. So D it is. So there we have it, my opinion and my ranking of all escalations in Dauntless. If I had to choose a winner between the Terra and the Frost Escalation, it would probably have to be the Frost Escalation, and that's a purely aesthetic opinion. So, we end it here. If you are new to the channel, please feel free to hit that like or subscribe button, or just comment down in the comment section below. Until next time, see you later.